Hello. This is going to be just a very casual video tutorial to show you how to work the Picot edge stitches as well as the Picot bind off as shown in the old sole pattern, now available on Ravelry. So this is the Picot edge stitch in the shawl, and this is the Picot bind off stitch. They look a little bit different, but they make a really lovely edge. So first I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do the edge stitch, which is along here. Right here you can see that I have done a few of this mesh lace rows, and those are found in section 3 of the pattern, and I did a little tutorial video that you'll find in the in the description below, as well as in the link in the upper right hand corner of this video. And that way, if you are having trouble or need a little bit of extra visual guidance for how to do section 3 of the shawl, there is a video to show you how to do that as well. But this video, we're going to just discuss the Picot edge and the Picot bind off. When you come to the Picot stitch, which is abbreviated PCT, it is going to be at the beginning of a row. So I'm right at the point where I would like to do a Picot stitch. For the Picot stitch on the edging, you can use either a knitted cast on or a cable cast on. The cable cast on is where you put your needle between the two stitches existing first and second on your needle, and you put it directly between them. A knitted cast on is where you put your needle into the first stitch on your needle. For the Picot edging, you can do whichever of those methods you prefer, but you will cast on 2 stitches using either a knitted or cable cast on. So I've cast on 1 and 2. So now I have 2 extra stitches. And then what you do is using a knitted bind off, you just go ahead and bind those off. So you'll knit the first stitch, knit the first stitch, knit the second stitch, and then bind off, knit the third stitch, and bind off. And you only bind off 2 stitches. You cast on 2, and then you bind off 2. And then you just work across the row, across your knitting, as pattern states. For this swatch, I am just knitting across the row in the knit stitch. And I will go ahead and quickly knit across another 2 or 3 rows and show you that stitch one more time. That way you understand how to do the Picot stitch at the edge. The Picot stitch at the edge and at the bind off is very similar. But because it's in a different location and you're doing it a slightly different sequence, it is important to show both of them to you, just in case you have questions. So I'm going to knit across. So I've knit across, and now I'm right back at the beginning of that row, and I'm going to knit another 2 rows so that I give myself a little bit of space between those Picot stitches. It is a 4-row repeat for how I am choosing to do Picot edging, where you do the Picot stitch at the beginning of every 4th row. Alright, I am right back now to the beginning of the 4th row in this sequence, and so I'm going to go ahead and do that Picot stitch again. So like I said before, using either a knitted or cable cast on, you're going to cast on just 2 stitches. 1, 2, and then you're going to, using a knitted bind off, you're going to bind off 2 stitches. So I will knit this stitch, knit the next stitch, and pull that first stitch over. Knit the next stitch and pull that first stitch over, and then just knit across in pattern. And the Picot stitch in this particular pattern is going to be at the beginning of a row where you just knit straight across. But if you're using another pattern, it might require you to do something else alongside this row. And so you'll just knit in pattern with whatever the pattern says. So let's go ahead and bind off this little swatch now. We're going to bind off using a Picot stitch edging. And you're going to start it very similarly using a cast on, and you're going to cast on 2 stitches. For the Picot edging, for the Picot bind off, excuse me, I recommend using a cable cast on for these stitches. It just feels a little bit neater to me. But you can again do either a cable or knitted cast on. I'm going to go ahead and cast on 2 stitches. And now, because this is a bind off, if we were to just cast on 2 stitches and bind off 2 stitches repeatedly, we would be getting nowhere. So we're going to cast off 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we will place that stitch back onto the working or the left needle, and we are going to cable cast on or knit cast on 2 new stitches. And then we will repeat by casting off or binding off 4 stitches. So it's pretty simple. Cast on 2, bind off 4. Cast on 2, bind off 4. 2, 3, 4. Place that stitch back on the needle. And as you can see, we have our little Picot stitches right there. I'm going to go ahead and do that again. Cast on, oh, split my stitch there. Cast on 2, 1, 2, and then bind off 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, replacing that final stitch, casting on 2 more. 1, 2, and then binding off 4. I do want to apologize if there's any background noise from fireworks. I am recording this right before this pattern for the old Soul shawl is being released, and there is New Year's fireworks happening right now as we speak. So I've bound off 4 there. We're nearly done with this little swatch. As you can see, those nice little Picot stitches are poking out there. So let me do these final couple Picot stitches and I'll show you how we finish it. So when you get to the very, very end here, you just have that 1 stitch left on your working needle. It's the one last stitch that you just worked. And you're going to go ahead and break your working yarn, and I recommend having 8 to 12 inches of tail. And I actually typically cut my yarns, but right now I don't have a scissor because I have not. And then I go ahead and elongate that stitch that's currently still on the needle, and then I grab my tail and pull it through and let that stitch come off the needle and then pull it nice and tight. And that last one might have a little bit of a funny shape, but when I weave in my ends, I weave the end back in this direction so that it makes the picot stitch be a little bit nicer. And so there we go. That's the edging, the edging and the bind off picot stitches. I hope that was helpful to you all. Again, if you would like to see how to do that section 3 lace mesh that is also in the old sole pattern, that is in the video linked below and in the upper right hand corner. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the pattern, and I hope this video was helpful to you. Thank you.